Also tonight, new information on two people accused of killing Monterey Dr. Thomas Burchard.
She was known as Bad Barbie, a model and mother of two who enjoyed the high life. She kept her Instagram feed stocked with bikini shots and a seemingly upscale lifestyle, but behind the curtain of social media was a woman who could barely afford to pay rent for herself and her children, who would kill to maintain a life of luxury. This is the story of Kelsey Turner, the girl who was born with little and went to unthinkable lengths to get a lot. Kelsey was born in Jonesboro, Arkansas, but life there simply did not match the kind of life she wanted for herself. Kelsey wanted to live luxuriously. She wanted to party every night, travel across the world, have a hot body and a perfect face. She wanted it all. But there was just one thing. She didn't want to work for it. So in 2016, she packed her bags and moved out to Salinas, California, where she became a full-time model. And she was actually pretty good at it. She appeared on the covers of some pretty noteworthy magazines like Maxim and Playboy Italia. But her career never really took off, and Kelsey often found herself relying on men to pay her bills for her and her two kids. But everything changed for Kelsey when she met Dr. Thomas Burchard. Thomas was a child psychiatrist at a community hospital in the Monterey Peninsula in California. Thomas loved his job, but he loved his patients even more. In fact, he loved his job so much that he was willing to pick up a skill nobody teaches in med school: magic. Thomas was actually known to perform magic tricks at the end of his sessions with patients just to make them laugh. Thomas belonged to the King's Castle, a magic club in Los Angeles, where he was a respected member for many years, just so he could watch the joy on a child's face when he pulled off a trick or two. His girlfriend of over 12 years, Judy Earp, describes him as someone who could very well give the shirt off his back, and with a kind smile. So no one knows exactly why Thomas Burchard ever messaged Kelsey Turner on Instagram, but no one was shocked when he started sending her money. Thomas had a reputation for helping not just the children in his care, but also sometimes their mothers and even women he didn't really know. So while Judy wasn't a fan of Thomas's generosity toward other women, she didn't necessarily stop him. According to Judy, Thomas's first major contribution to Kelsey's life was when he started paying her $3,000 a month rent for her condo in California. Pretty soon he was covering her rent every month, then her car, then her utilities, and random cash payments in between all of that. This girl was a full-blown sugar baby within a few months of meeting Thomas, and Judy, his girlfriend, kind of knew everything about it. Thomas had sent Kelsey over $300,000 in just 1 year, but both Kelsey and Judy confirmed that this was not a sexual relationship between the two of them. In fact, Kelsey told her mother, Samantha Ingram, that Thomas simply sent her money because she asked and because he had a huge crush on her.
About $300,000 that I know about, and possibly more.
And shortly after learning that, Samantha began to ask Thomas for money behind Kelsey's back, which he sent. But Judy wasn't having this for very long, and somewhere along the way, she felt like Thomas was doing too much and finally convinces him to cut Kelsey off. So Thomas hesitated a bit, and even though he didn't stop communicating with Kelsey completely, he did stop paying her rent. But when Kelsey found out that it was Judy who was coming between her and Thomas, Kelsey sends Thomas a text about Judy, saying she's going to kill Judy if she ends up getting evicted. But Judy was like, "I do not care. You need to stop sending that girl money." But Thomas didn't take Kelsey seriously, and he didn't think she was actually going to depend on him all the way until she got evicted. Like, surely if he stopped making the payments on her rent, Kelsey would have to get a job and start covering her rent herself, right? Nope, Kelsey ends up getting evicted. And it turned out Kelsey had grown so dependent on Thomas that she literally had no other means of income or really any intention of finding a real job. And shortly after the eviction, Kelsey convinced him to pay for her to move from California to Paradise, Nevada. Social services had just taken custody of one of her two kids, and she let Thomas know she didn't have any other options. So Thomas leased a 4-bedroom house for Kelsey and her son, telling one of his friends that he felt partially responsible for her misgivings. But just a few weeks in, she was back with a new sob story of how she was sick and how her new boyfriend was physically abusing her. It sounded true because Kelsey's new boyfriend, John Kennison, also happened to be a former gang member. But Thomas was annoyed with Kelsey by this point and wanted to confirm all of this for himself. So he books a trip to Las Vegas to check in with Kelsey and see how everything's going. And Judy called him later the day that he flew to Las Vegas, and his exact words to her were, "Kelsey Turner is such a consummate liar. I just had to check things out for myself." So Thomas got to Kelsey's house on March 1st, 2019, and the first thing he noticed was that Kelsey had taken in other roommates. She was living with her so-called abusive boyfriend, John, her friend Diana Pena, and 2 other roommates. And Thomas is like, "Oh, nice. I'm paying everyone's rent. Wonderful." And at this point, he's like figuring out that Kelsey is not planning on turning her life around at all. She's just like taking what she can get from Thomas. So Thomas hangs around Vegas for a few days, and then on March 3rd, Thomas and Kelsey go to pick up Kelsey's roommate, Diana, from work, but they get lost on the way home. Kelsey tried using the GPS on Thomas's phone to find their way back, and then she starts going through his texts, and that's where she discovers that Thomas had been texting back and forth with her mother, Samantha, and becomes enraged when she realizes he's been sending her money, and they also were exchanging some texts about how they could get her other child into a better living situation, and Kelsey just loses it. She starts hitting Thomas in the chest and screaming at him at the top of her lungs and just like flipping out all the way home. So when they get in the house, Diana immediately took Kelsey's son to a friend's house for the night because Kelsey was like off the rails. So Thomas goes into a bedroom upstairs to hide from Kelsey because he realizes she's in this like blind rage and she's totally lost control. It's at this point that Kelsey's boyfriend, John, jumped in. He broke the locked door in two. He armed himself with a baseball bat and hit Thomas in the head with it. So Diana comes in to break up the fight and help Thomas, and Thomas calmly tells Diana that he needed medical attention. He promises to tell the doctors that he'd been mugged and he hadn't been beaten by anybody. So they agree to take him, but since Diana couldn't drive, the only people who could drive him to the hospital were Kelsey and John, which is a horrible idea, obviously. So Diana said that while Thomas and Diana were waiting downstairs in the car, he told Diana that he was sure Kelsey and her boyfriend were going to kill him as he slipped in and out of consciousness in the back seat. But Diana didn't believe him until Kelsey told her that no one was going to the hospital unless someone cleaned up Thomas's blood in the room that he was staying in. Like, why would anyone need to clean the blood in the room? Like, let's get him medical care. Are we hiding evidence? So Diana hesitates, but she left Thomas with them and went upstairs to clean John's damage. But while she cleaned, Diana heard more screaming. She heard Kelsey shouting at John to knock him out. So Diana runs downstairs, but by the time she comes down to the garage, she saw John holding a gun covered in blood. And Kelsey refused to let Diana see what happened to Thomas, telling her it was too late.
He had a gun in his hand, he's covered in blood. I didn't want them to do what they just did to Dr. Burchard to me. Kelsey knew him a lot longer than she knew me.
So after not being able to reach Thomas for a couple days, Judy Earp called the police and told them everything she knew, including Kelsey's address. His phone number had been switched off on the afternoon of March 3rd and wasn't on until 3 days had passed when someone used it to text Judy. They were asking for her bank information, and Judy knew that was something Thomas would obviously never have had to ask her for. Thomas Burchard's body was found on March 7th after someone called in an abandoned Mercedes near Lake Mead, Las Vegas, with a broken window. Thomas's body was found in the trunk of the car, partially covered by towels and with a baseball bat. There were bloodstains all over the driver's seat and the back seat, as well as a charred front seat from a fire that apparently refused to catch. His credit and debit cards were in his front pocket, but his phone and a small notebook that contained all of his bank information were missing from the body. Interestingly, the car was registered in Kelsey Turner's name. According to the coroner, Thomas had been beaten to death with a small cylindrical object, likely a pistol. When the police followed Judy's lead to Kelsey's address, there was no one home, and they found blood all over the room that Thomas had stayed in, as well as in the garage. They also found a towel that matched some of the towels that were found in the Mercedes trunk. And Kelsey's cover story was that Thomas had returned to California with a bunch of guys she didn't know and left his phone and notebook. But the truth was that Kelsey and John had beaten Thomas to death, stuffed his body in the trunk of the car, and then drove the car out to the middle of the desert and abandoned him there. Kelsey and John were arrested 6 weeks later in Stockton, and Diana had turned herself in when she learned there was a warrant out for her arrest. In July of 2022, John pled guilty and was sentenced to 18 to 45 years for second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Diana, who gave a detailed testimony of everything that happened, also pled guilty and was sentenced to 3 years probation for being an accessory to commit murder. Kelsey Turner, however, avoided trial entirely by revealing that she was 4 months pregnant and then taking an Alford plea deal in 2023 that left her with a sentence of 10 to 25 years. John Kennison has since stated in a letter to ABC News that when he gets out, he wants to help others that were involved in similar situations to hopefully prevent the same thing from happening and show people that toxic love situations aren't always what they seem. Or maybe, how about just don't kill people, John? We don't really need you helping anyone, just stop killing people. That would be wonderful. Judy Earp made a victim impact statement at Kelsey's trial and said, "My entire world was viciously ripped from me with the murder of Thomas K. Burchard. I frequently dream that Tom has come home, and it was all a big mistake. Then I realized that the real nightmare is waking up and knowing that he will never come home." Since his death, many of Thomas's former patients have come forward to say that they still remember the joy he brought to them with his magic tricks. It's heartbreaking to know someone with such a profound impact was taken from the world all because of someone else's greed. We hope you rest easy, Dr. Burchard. You are sorely missed here. Thank you for watching our channel. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. Toodaloo!